Well, good evening and welcome to Psychedelic Capital from MicroDose. My name's Richard Skaife and I'm one of the partners at the Conscious Fund. Before we sort of dive into, I always tend to say this evening because, of course, I'm calling in from Malta, where it is now this evening. So before we go through this afternoon's, as most of the people who are joining us are from North America, before we go through this afternoon's proceedings, I'm just going to run through some slight revisions that we've got on our timetable. Also give you a little bit of housekeeping. If you want to fully engage in the conference, I'll let you know how you can go about doing that. So if you've got a pen and paper in front of you, then you might want to scribble down the revised schedule. Now is the introduction, which is currently what I'm doing right now. We are then going to move in about 45 minutes time to the first of our sponsors, which is Five Pharmaceuticals. And then at 2:25, that's Eastern time, we're going to be speaking with Rick Doblin from MAPS and also the North Star team. Some amazing updates, I believe, are coming from Rick. And we're also going to be talking about ethical investing into psychedelic medicine and also how you can ethically run a company in psychedelic medicine with the North Star team. Then we dive into the world of legal and regulatory affairs. What does it take to stay on the right side of the law? We've got some of the most eminent lawyers and law firms are participating in our legal panel, and that is all going to be happening at 3:15 p.m. Eastern time. And then we're going to wrap things up at around 3:45 p.m. Eastern time when we talk about the nascent sector of M&A. A guide to entrepreneurs and also a guide to investors. What should you be looking for? What sort of questions should you be asking when a company says they reckon they can be acquired in a few years' time by who knows who? We're going to talk about the M&A landscape at 3:45 p.m. Eastern. So a few little notes before we get things going. New Leaf, we're going to be moving across to another event. Unfortunately, they've not been able to join us today because of a few technical issues. I just want to welcome everybody who's joined us. We've got slightly higher numbers than we got in through June, which is fantastic. We've touched on the panels that we're going to be covering today. There isn't going to be any Psychedelic Capital in August, but we are actually planning two events in September. The first one we have just announced will be happening on the 3rd of September, and we'll have another one coming up towards the end of the month in September. We are not disappearing as MicroDose during August. We have a molecular masterclass where we take a deep dive into ketamine. It's actually a 2-day event, and it's running from the 21st to the 22nd of August. So if you are involved in any way in the ketamine industry, maybe you're a clinician, maybe you're an entrepreneur or an investor who's looking at that space, then our molecular masterclass on all things ketamine is happening on the 21st to the 22nd of August. Little bits of housekeeping to make life easier for you. If you're wanting to engage with our panelists, there's obviously a chat for you, which is most people's browsers running to the right-hand side of the screen. But we also have a dedicated Q&A feature. So if you're wanting to pose a question, don't pose it in the chat because that's not going to be seen by any of the panelists. What you need to do is use the Q&A section, post your question, and lobby the people in the chat to upvote your question, and then we will see if we can pose that to our panelists who are going to be speaking. A couple of announcements from us at the Conscious Fund. We launched yesterday the first psychedelic medicine industry job board. It is carrying jobs not only from our portfolio companies, but also from companies outside of the portfolio. It's completely free to use. So if you're part of the senior leadership team at a psychedelic medicine company and you have a role that you would like to advertise, then we'd be delighted to add it to our jobs board. If you want to find out more, just go to the Conscious.fund. That's the Conscious.fund, where you can visit our job board. We've got everything on there from chief medical officers, chief financial officers, people who want to work on the tech side of things. So that's the first bit of the housekeeping over and done with. Think of this next part of the event as if you Zoom bombed somebody and you've just sort of invaded their conversation, because what we're going to really do is just sort of really free flow on the state of the psychedelic medicine category, We're going to be speaking with Andrew O'Donnell from Supercharged Stocks and my co-founding partner at the Conscious Fund, Henri Sant-Cassia. And we should now have Andrew O'Donnell with us. Good afternoon, Andrew.
Good afternoon, Richard. It's great to see you. It's a wonderful honor to be here as well. I'm excited to have a bit of a discussion, but also, more importantly, to learn a lot.
Fantastic. And we've enjoyed many fun, free-flowing conversations, and I think that's the spirit that we're going to try and do today. Andrew is one of the most enthusiastic people I think we've ever come across. In life, in general, not just about psychedelic medicine, and he runs some very interesting groups where he talks to his investors about emerging categories, and he has been banging the drum about psychedelic medicine to his investors. And it's really interesting because, of course, we spend time talking to people who have been deep down the rabbit hole for many, many years. But, of course, a lot of people are very, very new to the space. And I think what Andrew does amazingly well is, brings a lot of those sort of questions to the forefront and, helps people who are new to the space kind of really understand, what's happening in psychedelic medicine. And hopefully we should also have Henri Sant-Cassia on the line. But Henri is calling us from the beautiful English countryside. And unfortunately, sometimes that does cause us a few technical problems because I do think his internet connection is actually made out of string. So I'm not too sure if Henri is actually on the line at the moment.
I'm here, I'm listening. I hope you can all hear me.
We can. Fantastic. Clearly, you've got your metal hat on, and you're holding your pole high in the air.
I have, yes. Very good to see you again, Andrew. By the way.
Wonderful to see you again too.
Okay, so without further ado, like I said, just imagine you've Zoom bombed into somebody's private Zoom chat, and you've got three people who are deeply excited by psychedelic medicine. So I'm going to hand over to you, Andrew, and just sort of let you take control and dive into some of the questions that you get asked, and we'll kind of really sort of take it there and we'll free flow.
Sure. And I thought I'd just kind of give a bit of a background as to how I got into not only what I'm doing, but why this space. And for me, it goes back a long way. I mean, I was reading Carlos Castaneda books back years ago in the late 80s and 90s. I've read The Archaic Revival by Terence McKenna back in the 90s. So I had a deep, I thought there was wonderful insights into this whole other world. And that was during university, and I just kind of forgot about it. And moved on with my life, went on to Merrill Lynch, worked in finance, did all of that. But that kind of part in the back of my brain was always interested in that because that kind of spiritual sense really resonated with me with those type of shamanic stories, this crossover between nature and the mind and the human spirit. And I just thought, there's something in that just resonated as a story within me. And it goes back. I mean, I'm Irish, so there's like Celtic Druid roots there. So maybe it's awakening something of that inside me. But it always kind of stayed. And along the way, I had, I live in Vancouver, so you can't live in Vancouver without being touched by addiction. And so that I know very well. I know all too well. And along the way, while I was interested in other things, I started hearing about ayahuasca. I started hearing a little bit about ibogaine. And I remember even there was an old show called Huff, and they talked about MDMA that clinical psychologists and psychiatrists were using to help. And I thought, wow, you know what, maybe I'll take a look at that, just kind of passing. So once again, it always had been there. I'd known that for years it had been researched, but of course it's untouchable, taboo, can't talk about it. And now we're at this forefront where all this convergence of lots of financial and market and political and economic stuff that I read, where whenever I put anything, like I use the term in ahead of the curve for my newsletter and for people, is I always look for something that's going to lead towards this ethical, conscious betterment of the future. So whether it's this drive towards the electrification of the future with battery power, and where does that come? How does it come about? how can we do this integrated well within nature as well as our environment. But this great shift, and what the World Economic Forum is calling a great reset, this great reset that's happening right now happens throughout history, and they're usually extremely tumultuous, extreme upheavals, which we're getting a taste of right now. And within that, we're either plunged into darkness for a bit and forced to grow, or we adapt faster and we can grow a lot faster. And I see typically when you're talking about some of the problems or issues I have with someone who says, tell me a bit about the psychedelic market, they immediately think, uh-oh, FDA, we're going to have a battle against government because they're getting revenues from the pharmaceutical companies. What about this? What about that? And I kind of put it, because I don't know, and this is going to be one of the questions we're going to talk about, is I say, listen, we're in this great reset right now. Things are being escalated and elevated at a rapid pace. This has become much more mainstream, not only just because it's mainstream, but it got my attention, not because of any retail use or fun use. I have no interest in that market whatsoever. It was when I started hearing about the success they're having with PTSD, with addiction, with blood-brain barrier type of brain disorders, any of these issues, I knew that the war on drugs was a complete and utter disaster. And I also know that when I look around and you see the level of drugs, whether it's pharma drugs or street drugs, is rampant in our society, there's something deeply wrong. So there has to be a better model. And whether that means just forcing it down, which is what I love about what's happening here, is that there's people saying, you know what, we're not sitting around waiting anymore. We're going to start pushing this forward. Because what we have today clearly doesn't work. I mean, unless someone's the old guard that's holding on to some sort of belief system or monetary system, it's just not working. I mean, the results are pretty obvious. So we need to push forward and look at some of the data that's being buried, that's being forgotten about, or being purposely ignored, and really shine some light and bring this to the forefront. And that's what really gets me excited about it, because I think that we're sitting at that precipice at that shift right now. And when we see a lot of great management companies, with a lot of great minds coming together and pushing this towards people saying, if we do this ethically, in a ESG kind of environmentally sustainable, in a growth manner that makes sense, we can have a market here where, yes, there's profits to be made, but more importantly, where there's a huge societal impact, which would be massive, and a big shift in just how we interact with each other. So I see the big macro picture. The micro one is, and when you get into the details, a lot tougher. The first one, which you guys can help me out with, because like I said, I'm pretty smart on some of the other older markets I've been involved in for a while, but this is a new one for me. I see the huge potential. But right off the bat, the first one I get from people that look to me and talk to me is they say, where's the big fight going to be if you're talking about whether it's regulatory, FDA, or if it's government? Where do you see that first one?
Thank you, and I think I'm going to hand some of that over to Henri, and kind of talk over some of the sort of the regulatory landscape from a venture capitalist perspective and how kind of we're sort of looking at the market. But actually, I just wanted to pick up actually on public perception, because this week in the UK, and it's been shared quite widely, I think the story has proliferated far and wide. 3 of the UK biggest red titles did very positive pieces on psilocybin. And one of them was very left of centre, The Guardian, but 2 of them were very much right of centre, which was the Daily Mail and the Telegraph. They're not known for being the most liberal of thinking newspapers, and I thought, oh, this is going to be a disaster. I dread to think what they're going to be saying. Crazed mushroom kids, and I was like, wow, this is incredibly balanced. It's actually incredibly positive. And I thought, right, okay, now I'm going to be really brave, and I'm going to read the comments section, because that's where you really start to see, misconceptions come alive. And I have to say, I was absolutely blown away. People were being incredibly candid and open in terms of their own sort of personal life stories. And there was a resounding positivity towards psilocybin. Most people saying, I've never even heard of this before. I've been dealing with this and this and this. And if this can do anywhere near what these studies are indicating, then I'm going to be the first person to sign up. And then it would usually say, Doris, 67 years of age.